So I'm sure you're aware, today we're having a panel discussion on the psychological price of entrepreneurship. Doing this startup stuff is pretty hard, and when I was just researching the blurb to put up on the Meetup page today, I came across those stats that are pretty eye-opening. 50% of people that start companies are more likely to suffer some kind of mental illness in their lifetime. So it's pretty staggering, and we just want to have a good discussion around it, especially as part of Mental Health Week. So let's bring up our panel members. We've got Robbie Vick, Michelle Powell, and Lockie Samuel from Happiness Co. Please make them welcome. Alrighty.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Let me put on my glasses so I appear more sophisticated. All right.
You dealing with
Thanks, man.
So we're going to roll in.
Oh, you're going to be the room maker. Okay, cool. So I thought we'd just start by doing a quick intro. If you just want to go through and introduce your name, your title, and what sort of keeps you busy on a day-to-day.
Ladies first.
Oh, I could yell. I'm used to herding up cows.
Yeah.
My name is Michelle Powell, obviously, that was what I was introduced as. And I have, I've been with Happiness Co for about 2.5 years now. I was working remotely from Gippsland in Victoria and moved over here about 9 months ago. I work in our online programs, coordinating those, and I've just recently started a movement called Empower Her that works in the space of domestic violence.
I'm Lockie, currently with Happiness Co, and we've started our own business under that umbrella called FIFO Happiness. So in the FIFO industry for about 10 years, went through depression, went through a partner who was depressed and suicidal, and then went through that stuff myself. So having come out of that industry and upskilling myself, learning how to speak and unpacking my own trauma and different patterns, I guess, I decided to jump back in the industry, did that last year with my own business, and then decided that it would be awesome to partner with an organisation like Happiness Co and with someone like Robbie, who I believe is one of the best facilitators in that space, because he has this knack of bringing fun to mental health, which is not something you don't necessarily put two and two together, but that's what we're doing at the moment. We just held the FIFO Mental Health and Happiness Summit. So that was for, I think we had like 90 mining reps turn up to that, just progress the conversation within mining. And then we've just launched our FIFO Happiness Tour of WA as well. So that's coming up in December, and we're looking to just travel WA, hit the road, and get to as many, I guess, mine sites, camps, offices, businesses, and groups as we can. That's my passion, and that's why I'm part of Happiness Co.
Very cool.
Good morning. My name is Robbie Vick, obviously again. I'm the General Manager at Happiness Co, and I've been there for just over 3 years now, and the social enterprise itself has existed for 4 years. I'm previously from the team building world, and then before that I used to coach kids in kids sports. I've only ever had 3 jobs in my life, and they've all been challenging in their own ways, but this one, I guess, as was exemplified with the intros there, I basically manage 5 or 6 entrepreneurs in the space of whatever they're passionate about. So obviously Michelle and her story around DV and family violence, and then Lockie in the space of FIFO Happiness. We have close to 6 other team members who have joined Happiness Co for a certain purpose and then brought their skills to the rest of Happiness Co. So they sort of come with a passion and they start that program, and then that permeates through the business. So, Michelle is an admin gun who takes care of all the processes. Lockie is just a networking extraordinaire, and as well as being passionate about FIFO Happiness and mental health. And then we have a whole range of other people who I'm sure we'll be able to touch on later on. But my day-to-day is just managing, I guess, entrepreneurs within the social enterprise, and then trying to herd the cat that is our CEO and our founder as well. He's an amazing gentleman, but as the guys here will attest to, he's a visionary, and I'm sure you've got people in your team and yourself who may be the visionary, and it's about managing, the ups and downs of the way they feel about the business as well. So yeah, I get to do some really cool stuff.
Very cool. All right. So before we sort of really get stuck into it, do you, it's probably a question for you, Robbie. Do you want to just explain what Happiness Co actually is and what you do, and for those people that haven't heard of it before?
Yeah, has anyone heard of Happiness Co prior to looking us up? 1 person, 2 people, 3 people. We need to have a chat to Hannah. Our marketing girl's getting fired. No, I'm joking. Yeah, look, I mean, it's something you come across when you're actively looking for this space. So mental health, happiness, well-being. We started in the individual space, which Michelle runs the programs for, and then we branched out into things like corporate and schools, and that's taken over the other individual spaces, our leading branches of the social enterprise. But I guess predominantly we work in the preemptive mental health space. So if you think about the green, amber, red of a traffic light, we work in the green when it comes to the mental health spectrum. Psychology itself, EAP, so employee assistance programs that the bigger organisations have, the Are You OK days, the milestone events. We're in Mental Health Week right now. The foundations, the associations, the commissions, all work in the amber and the red, in my opinion. And a lot of the discussions we've had with them they've concurred with that. So we work in the green, the everyday decision making, and what underpins what we do is story, emotion, and then decisions. So I'm sure along your journey, as many have already mentioned, excuse me, I've worked at Oktoberfest in the Gardens on the weekend, so my voice is absolutely shot. The way that we like to present what we do is that if you're making better choices for yourself every day and you're accountable and responsible for those, you can take steps towards the person you want to be, or the entrepreneur that you want to be, the business owner, the parent, the child, the sibling that you want to be, rather than away. And then if we can make more and more decisions for the people around us and ourselves that are positive, we live a happier, more fulfilled life. So that's the kind of angle that we take. And that's, led us to where we are today.
Terrific. Excellent. Well, I think it's probably a good idea if we can sort of go a little bit deeper, and if you guys don't mind just sort of sharing your stories, a bit about your background and what led you to the work you're doing at Happiness Co.
Yes, I think I touched on mine, but something I haven't, because I've been here before to these panels and through the Plus 8 Spring program as well, and something I haven't touched on, which played a huge role in me wanting to be in this position, is leaving the mining industry or being forced to resign initially and then being evacuated, being suicidal. Is I tried to start a tech company with no tech experience, no business experience, just coming from this place of scarcity, really. Like the guilt and shame of like being forced to resign and then being evacuated sort of led to me trying to create something which meant I didn't have to go back to the industry that I got pushed out of, essentially. And so I put all my savings into that. Blew all my savings. I don't know if you know a company called Appster.
Yep.
Yeah. So I went through there and wasted all of my savings and then ended up with nothing and had to keep borrowing money to pay off a lot of my debt. And I got to the point where I borrowed so much off so many people that I felt like I was a burden and ultimately attempted to take my life. And so that's where this passion comes from for me, because I know what it feels like to be down in that dark place. And Rob says all the time, it's like, people, we come in, we tell them stories and people think it's misery. It's supposed to be happiness though, but like duality, understanding dark to light. And if you don't understand the dark, you don't understand the bad times, you can't really truly be grateful for the ups and the light. So that's where I come from. That's why I'm so passionate about it. I've lost friends to suicide in the industry as well. So this is very close to my heart, and it's something that I'll just keep chugging along with no matter what happens.
Right.
As Robbie suggested before, and by the way, I was the only one that could follow instructions.
What was the instruction?
The instruction was a short intro and then our story.
Okay.
So I come from a history of domestic violence where I suffered mental, financial, sexual and physical abuse for 12 years, culminating in me in hospital and then being sent on suicide watch, just under the visor of my husband at that time. During that period, I was at an all-time low. I had completely lost the person that I am today. I didn't know who that person was. I lost my children. I lost what I thought were my friends. I was digging a really big hole for myself that then saw me looking at who I was through my own eyes and deciding that I could be a much better person than the one that was sleeping on a park bench and eating cans of tuna. So that started my personal development, and I just did everything that I could and climbed and climbed and climbed. And when saying everything, when I came across Happiness Co, I had my doubts because nothing else had really taken me over the edge or got me back on the ledge, probably. But when I came to Happiness Co, I found a family, I found a community of like-minded people who didn't want to stay in the suffering that they were in, who really wanted to, just crawl their way back up and find who they wanted to be. So I wrote a book on my story. I didn't tell everyone what had happened to me. What I did was show them that they too can become an amazing person after they've been through trauma.
Wow, okay. Thanks, Sam.
Obviously, again, exemplified by what these guys have said. I was working in the team building industry for 6 years. If you've heard of Corporate Challenge Australia, they're a team building and team dynamics organisation, and I ran that here in SA and in the Northern Territory for just over 3 years. I had all those states. We went from a 1.2 million turnover to about $6.8 million turnover in that time that I was there. And it wasn't me, it was bringing on amazing people. So when I met Julian, who's our CEO and our founder, I thought there's got to be more to life than being on a golf course every day doing survivor programs. And there's no disrespect to people that are doing that. I just had a really great opportunity come, land in my lap, which was meeting Jules and hearing his story. And just like you guys heard snippets of now, hearing those stories gave me the impetus to leave that job and full transparency, take a big pay cut and a big leap to come and try and bring what they were doing in the individual space at Happiness Co into the corporate world. But quite literally, I met Michelle, I met ambassadors, the people that run and help facilitate our online programs, and I thought these guys deserve more than 30 to 40 people in their online programs. So maybe I can bring some sort of catalyst to the marketing or do something different to help them break through that sort of 40-person cap, which we did that next program, which was really cool. And then that concentrically works its way out to become a bigger and bigger community. So basically met the right people at the right time and ended up in now what is, I just couldn't imagine myself working anywhere else with any other people. We're just so lucky to have people like Michelle and Lockie and all our ambassadors, and people that come into our organisation are just so lucky to have them. It's pretty incredible.
Terrific, awesome.
Can I say something?
No.
Myself and Rob will talk the house down. So if you're comfortable, I'm happy for you to say land the plane.
All right, it's a safe word. All right, cool. Well, hey, so as entrepreneurs, I know we all have kind of bad days. We all have stressful days, whether it's trying to make payroll or thinking about how we're going to pay back investors or something like that. And I mean, I know personally, I just might attribute that to just normal, everyday, run-of-the-mill stress. I was wondering if you guys can help explain how, as best you can, sort of how you're actually feeling on some of your darker moments, and how can, as entrepreneurs, sort of distinguish between something that might be more run-of-the-mill and something that might need further, investigation or thought.
So I guess for me, like my darker moments, because I've been to the point where I attempted to take my life, I can always return to that space. And so when things get really dark, I tend to return to suicidal thoughts. And then for me, it's having a process or a framework that works very, very quickly, like within 1 to 5 minutes, that I can drop out of the mind and get myself off of that loop, that negative cycle of thoughts. Drop back into my body, understand how I'm feeling, like what emotions coming up for me and what I'm suppressing by feeling that way. And then using a state changing technique like a 6 deep breaths, one that takes you from fight or flight to rest and digest. So you're a bit more restful and you make more rational decisions, have more rational thoughts, and from that place I can identify the thought, analyze the thought, and choose whether or not I run off of that. And that seems to make all the difference. And of course, like having a morning routine that gets you in a powerful state every morning, that aids in that as well. And I've noticed that when I'm in a down patch in an ebb, it's usually because I haven't stuck to that routine that serves me so well.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and I guess for me, and this is one of the things we teach within our programs, is building ourselves a toolbox. So essentially, we have things that we can turn to and use in times of stress to manage that component and bring ourselves back up to a level where we can function without acting from stress. And I guess one of mine's actually going to a mirror and looking in a mirror and going, are you being authentic? Because I spent so long pretending and covering things up that that is my default. So, if there was something that was going on that you weren't 100% sure that you can handle, I would default into this facade that everything's okay, I can do this, but it's being authentic and actually saying, no, I need a little bit of help. So for me, the same as Lachlan, I forgot his name, Lockie. Same as this guy beside me. Having routines too, we talked about the preemptive, but getting up in the morning and having a structure that you can stick to that activates your RAS, your reticular activating system, to know that what you're doing is setting yourself up for the day.
Yeah, look, I mean, in terms of is it, just everyday stress, hands up if you've had money problems in the last 12 months. No T-Rex arms, hands up. Right, have a look around the room and this is a great place to be vulnerable about this sort of stuff, right? Hands up if you've had, family, kid, relationship issues in the last 2 years. Right? So, yeah, it is an everyday stress. We've just done a really scientific poll about it. I honestly think that there's power in numbers, there's power in vulnerability, and there's power in teaming up with other people about how you're feeling about certain things, because there's not one person in the world who hasn't, there's not one person in the world who has something that hasn't been through before with either a group or a person, going through that journey. So you have to remember that perspective is everything, which is what you were talking about. Like, I've been at my lowest point before. I know how to get past it. You've been through 100% of your worst days because you're still here. And not to get too bumper stickery, but there's a lot of people out there doing way worse than you that are doing better than you. So you have to keep that perspective. That doesn't mean that it solves your problems, and it doesn't mean that everyday problems are smaller than the larger problems that everyone is going through as a society. So I just think it's really important to have your own toolbox, because everyone has this sort of pressure on them that so-and-so does breath work and so-and-so does meditation. You couldn't keep me still enough to do either of those things, so mine has to be something different. It's all subjective. So finding happiness is subjective, the concept of happiness is subjective, and then what gets you away from unhappiness is going to be the same. So I think just keep that perspective as you go through your ups and downs and the ebbs and flows. And there are amazing resources out there, and there's resilience is like the buzzword within the business community at the moment, and I love it, but it's one tool on the tool belt, which is resourcefulness, and that's finding what you need to be feeling the way you'd like to feel.
Okay, perfect. Well, hey,
That's my dad, by the way. No, joking.
nice. So in the startup community a couple of years ago, we lost a dear friend, an annoying startup member to suicide. I had a conversation with him the day before it happened, And I'm sure, as you said before, you sort of cover it up. You don't necessarily go and talk about these things naturally when you're in your dark days. So how do we approach someone we think might be suffering? Or how do we even identify it in the first place? It's a bit of a tricky question, I know. But go ahead.
You found the right people, yeah.
So I work as a one-on-one coach, and I also, as I said before, I coordinate the online programs. And often I don't come face to face with the people until they start the program. But it's determining what they're saying behind the words they're using and listening, not giving advice, really listening to what they're saying. Often we practice this attitude of having to fix everyone. And we can fix ourselves, we can look after ourselves, but those same strategies won't necessarily work for other people. In a space where you're one-on-one, you said that you spoke to him the day before, it's really looking into someone's eyes. You can tell how a person is feeling from what you can see in their eyes. And I'm not being spiritual or out there, but if you looked at a photo of someone, cut off the bottom of their face, you could see if they're happy or if they're really struggling or sad. And I really would encourage you to start looking at people's eyes when you're having conversations with them, because it enables you to focus on what they're saying, but also to determine where they're coming from in that conversation. And that then leads you to be able to ask the question, is that really what's going on? I really feel for you. But don't just ask the question, hear the answer, and then, okay, see ya. Keep asking, keep them talking. If someone can talk through what's going on, regardless of whether it's negative or positive, then it's left their subconscious. When they go to sleep at night, their brain knows what to do with it. So just encouraging people to speak with you. Don't give them advice, because what worked for you may not work for them, which is what Robbie said before. But listening is the number one thing.
Okay. Anything to add to that, Lockie?
Yeah, I guess to add to that is building up a level of care around the way that you interact with people in the first place. Generally, if we're not able to identify a pattern within someone who's close to us, it's because we don't care enough to actually listen, to show up, to be attentive to how it is that they're presenting and speaking. Through the way that they speak, the words that they use, the tonality, and the way that they move, you will get slight cues, but it is just really training yourself to understand that and, I guess, pick up on the change in patterns in the way that they're showing up.
Right.
And for the most part, a lot of us will tend to, if someone shows up differently or poorly, someone that we're used to interacting with, and they show up in that way, a lot of us tend to get defensive. We allow the ego to take over, and we create a story around why they're showing up that way. Oh, I must have done something wrong. Oh, am I an asshole? Do they still like me? And so we show up from a place of scarcity rather than a place of care and compassion.
Right. Are there any drastic reactions that you guys have had when you sort of approach that conversation of mental health, and like how do people react, and then how do you continue to be supportive, while looking after your own mental health as well?
Yeah, that's a good one. And I actually just mentioned that to someone this morning, that we've got a really busy week this week with everyone being out speaking, and being Mental Health Week. Everyone's out speaking, we're covering people. It creates a lot of awareness around mental health, so we get a lot more calls, a lot more emails, a lot more messages. And looking after yourself every day is one thing that I'd encourage everyone to take a look at where they're at in that situation. Half an hour a day is all you need. If you can't put aside half an hour a day for yourself, then you really need to look at where you're at. And this is where that preemptiveness comes in again. Whatever does it for you. Robbie was saying he can't meditate or breathe. He holds his breath most of the time. But you might be someone who has to go to the gym, or someone who has to run, or someone that just wants to sit out on their front porch. Do you have porches over here?
Yes.
Their front porch for half an hour and watch the world go by. I know some people like to go into busy shopping centres and sit down and watch people and look at what they're wearing, what they're doing. But just making sure that you have that space for yourself to look after yourself. And when you're actually starting up a business, they're the times that you really need to focus on self as well, because we tend to go, no, I need to do this, I need to do this. This is going to set me up for the rest of my life. But in 2 years, when you're burnt out and you have to lay on your front porch for half an hour, is not when you can start your mental health journey.
Okay, terrific. Robbie, anything else?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add to that is, we work with a lot of organisations and teams within organisations that care and carry, and that's a big issue within society at the moment. Teachers become accidental counsellors all the time. We work with casualty prison, so they're inmates in their offices, but particularly their officers, they care and carry. They can't be vulnerable. There's all these environments. So the physical and the emotional environment really matter. So make sure that yours is the best it possibly can when you can control it. And never ever feel guilty for being selfish to be selfless as well.
Right. So as someone trying to support someone that's struggling, are there any really common mistakes that you guys see, or anything that we should definitely not do while trying to be supportive?
Yeah, I think just trying to have the answers. Not everyone, everyone in this room, you've chosen to spend your time learning about the psychological price of entrepreneurship, right? So you put an hour of your day towards either yourself or someone else. So I'm assuming you're not assholes, okay? And if you are the 1% of the population that wakes up wanting to be that, you've still come to the right place. But you need to remember that you don't have to have all the answers. So don't try and solve everyone's problems in that conversation. And if you do that, you actually rob them of the opportunity to be vulnerable and share their emotions. So for example, if I spoke to Lockie and asked him, "Are you okay?" Right? And he said to me, "Yeah, I'm just work's killing me. My boss is an asshole. The to-do list is stacking up, and no one's helping with the processes." I could say to him, "You know what, man? Yeah, I've got the same thing. Jules is an idiot. I could take him on this journey of I know, I've been. I can give you this, and this." But then I actually rob him of the actual opportunity to give me what it really is, which is he'll give me external, which is career, relationships, finance. It might be a struggle with his health, or you can take that journey with him in that conversation. So that must be really difficult. Tell me more about it, and then he'll give you the internal, because the biggest killer of men under 45 in Australia is suicide. The biggest cause of suicide in those men is relationship breakdowns. The biggest cause of that is financial pressure. And the biggest cause of that is not being able to share and be vulnerable and obviously own up to the fact that you're struggling with those financial issues. So if we go back, the first thing I would have mentioned is what? Relationships. My missus, my partner, whatever it is. And then it goes down that internal pathway. So I think just hold space, don't try and I think most of the mistakes come from the people who are asking the question, and a lot of the reactions come from that person asking the question, because it's really hard to sit down and ask someone how they are truly.
Right. Yeah, great advice. You guys, anything to add to that? Or?
No, I think it was really good.
Work on it. Excellent, terrific. Okay, so you sort of touched on it before, but as entrepreneurs, is there anything specifically that we should be doing in this profession to really look after our own mental health and even the mental health of employees? Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think for me, in this space, it comes down to understanding the way that you're showing up as an entrepreneur and why you're doing what you're doing. Is it coming from a genuine, pure place where you're wanting to provide value? Or are you doing it to be perceived a certain way, which then causes you to show up inauthentically? Because if you're showing up inauthentically in order to derive value or to reap rewards, at the end of the day, you're not going to be feeling too crash hot about who you are. and what that business is. And generally within those spaces, we tend to build resentment towards something that's causing us to be inauthentic or show up as someone who we know we're not. So that would be a huge one for me. And then communication, whether that's vulnerability, like within yourself and journaling how you're feeling, it's really just expressing what you're going through instead of stacking layers upon layers of emotion until you get to a point where you have this outburst or explode or have a meltdown or a breakdown. And then with your team, just making sure there's an open channel of communication, allowing your teammates and members to be seen, heard, and held. Because if they're not being seen and heard, if you're not communicating openly, you're not giving them a space to be heard, then you're going to feel like they're insignificant, which is one of the 6 human needs. And I know I definitely don't like feeling insignificant. It's one of the things that I hated about the FIFO industry. And I know a lot of people need to feel that sort of significance, so they feel like they're living on purpose.
Right. So just before you move on, is there anything in the FIFO industry that you see employers needing to change to allow that to happen for their employees?
Yeah, I think there's a huge disconnect at the moment. There's a delta between those on the ground and management styles around that communication, which is taking things on board and then working on a solution. At the moment, from what I've seen personally, it's getting these complaints, but then seeing those complaints as people being whingers and not really taking them too seriously. But within FIFO and mining, that's understandable because there's a lot of unknowns, there's a lot of uncertainty around mental health and emotional health and behaviour. Because we don't have any sort of regulations around what we are supposed to do, how we are supposed to respond. And for the most part, management isn't trained on how to deal with those scenarios. We're taught to outsource to an external assistance provider, and that's the end all and be all. There's a sign on the wall that you point to and say, there's the number, ring it. That's how we deal with it. So I think for the most part, what we have to do is figure out how we can be the conduit between the workers on the ground, the management, and the external assistance provider, so that we have a smooth flow and transition of people who are opening up, expressing concerns, and then being fed into the networks of health professionals that can help them.
Okay, terrific. Anything to add, Michelle or Robbie?
Yeah, just totally agree. Being heard it should be one of our human needs, but people want to be heard. They have ideas, they have issues, and if as we show up authentically, we allow them to step into that authenticity as well. So just holding space for others and allowing them to feel heard and feel loved, like you were saying earlier.
Yeah, the only thing I add to that is having managed, quite a few people that have had their ups and downs. I think when you've got a passion, passion begins the process, and then processes continue that passion. So just make sure you have all your frameworks in place, because you will see the ebbs and flows, but then you'll start to notice the markers for where you need to personally do something or when you need to put responsibility onto someone within your team. And just hands up, who has someone working with them or next to them or under them or around them in their business? So a big majority. I'm always interested because, in this world, it can be a very lonely world, obviously. And that's why we have these amazing networks and events like Morning Startup. So, just go to everything you possibly can to learn about what others are doing for their team. And always allow contribution. That's another emotional human need. We didn't rehearse that, but, contribution and significance innately within us. Our emotional health relies on them a lot of the time, particularly when you work in a world that needs that sort of element of selfishness and bullishness to get through your problems with a small group. So just persist, and you can always step back into being kind and contributing, no matter where you are in your business, whether you run it, own it, or facilitate it every day.
All right, terrific. Well, I guess what do you, if you could sort of wave the magic wand, what do you hope the future looks like with regards to mental health and this conversation that we're having today? What needs to change in the future, or any promising research that's coming out, or what do you see? What do you hope for?
Well, I'll go quickly. I think we just need to make sure that we know that that spectrum that I mentioned earlier exists. Because too many people, when they feel unhappy, think they're depressed. And too many people, when they are depressed, don't take the right action at the right time because it's very hard. 50% of depression and anxiety in the world today is caused by lifestyle choices. So if we can make that preemptive move in the green space, we can make a fundamental difference to how the suicide rate is going and trending, and how people are showing up to places like work and presenteeism and absenteeism, etc. So yeah, just let people know that those spectrums exist and that it's okay to feel certain ways at certain times.
Can I say world peace?
Sure, why not?
Old enough. Balanced. If we're talking about our human needs and looking at how we can just balance right across them, being driven by the ones that, like variety and growth, rather than being driven by things like significance, and just altering our ego level. We'll always have an ego, but just altering where that sits so that we can show compassion to people, compassion to ourselves.
I think I'd love for us as a collective to be a whole lot more vulnerable, and that starts with self first. If you can't be vulnerable about what it is that you're thinking, feeling, and the way that you're behaving, then there's a high possibility that you're not going to be able to do that with someone else. So we first have to understand the moments of impact that have occurred within our lives up until this point that are influencing the way that we're showing up in the world at the moment. Thinking, feeling, acting. And then once we're at that space, when we're comfortable, we're vulnerable enough to see, acknowledge, and accept it, then we can start being vulnerable with other people in a genuine, authentic way. And I think if we're being vulnerable with each other, we're really connecting on a deeper level, which allows for those 6 human needs to come up and for us not to act from a place of wounding, trauma, ego, or conditioning, where we're pushing people down, especially in the entrepreneurship space. It's, from what I've seen anyway, I've been like immersed in the entrepreneurship space here, especially with the stuff with Appster, is we tend to pull other people down who are doing well, which comes from that tall poppy syndrome. But if we understand ourselves enough to show up authentically with compassion and empathy, we don't need to do that because we feel enough within ourselves without needing to bring someone down to our level.
All right. Okay. Well, I think before we open up to audience Q&A, where do people go for support? Where should people go for help?
Just call me. Initially, as we're talking about the green, amber, and red lights, we're in preemptive. We do also have one-on-one coaches. We have programs, obviously, that are run online, but we can also run programs individually, depending on what the kind of space that people are in. And then I guess after that, we're looking at things like Suicide Line and, couldn't tell me what they're all called, Lifeline, and all the places that we're constantly seeing on TV. And I think that should show us that there is a bit of a problem in society at the moment, where people are seeking help for their mental health. Speak, if there's anyone in this audience today that we've triggered or that has an issue going on at the moment, just speak up. And as Lockie said before, with vulnerability comes power. Once you release what's going on for you, you've got more power over it.
All right.
Just quickly before Lockie does his gratuitous plug for Fight for Happiness, because I think that's just as important as our main sort of umbrella, which is Happiness Co. So happinessco.org. Individual, workplace, schools, parent-child relationship programs, everything that you could possibly look for in a preemptive mental health organisation is there. But ultimately, the first thing to do is to go back and check out that person in the mirror and just have a look at what it is you're going through. And we all tell ourselves a story. And if I go up to you right now and say, how are you doing? You'll say,
good.
Thanks for the participation. You'll say, fine, good, living the dream. but that's not the true story. So just, it's okay to say that, don't feel guilty for that, but the more that you say that, guess who's going to get convinced that that's the truth? You. And internally that might not be the case. So please just make sure you're looking in that mirror and making sure that you're making the right decision about who you share with, what you share, and how you share it. And then there's not just us. We have a best in world skill around happiness and that preemptive stage, but there's much better organisations out there for the reactive and the symptomatic. Go and utilise them. There's so much out there that doesn't cost money, because I know that's a big barrier to entry, and that's why we exist in that other space. But we want to make it affordable and accessible at the right time. That's my 2 cents.
Okay.
I guess something that I teach in my vulnerability course is effective communication. And with vulnerability, part of that is first writing out what's real for you, what's going on for you, how you're thinking and feeling, what you think about the way that you're showing up, getting that down onto paper, and then finding someone who you trust immensely, and then asking their permission to share something with them, something that's negatively impacting your life. And if they say no, that's fine. They might not be ready for it. Just acknowledge the fact that they're willing, they're courageous enough to say no, because not a lot of people are. But when you do find someone that you trust immensely that says, yes, I'm open to it, you can either tell them what you've written or give them what you've written, and making sure it's not coming from a place of, I need to tell you this so that you feel a certain way about me. Getting attention, getting empathy and compassion, it's not about that. It's about you being seen, heard, and having that level of significance and love, without expectation on the other person to solve your issues for you. It's purely about expression and communication.
Okay. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming down and sharing your time and helping us out like this. But I'd like to open the floor to audience Q&A. Does anyone have anything? Go for it.
First way is going to want to get to know
Hang on. There's one at the back.
Sorry, I hope I get this all straight because I got too much out of this, so I'm going to condense what I'm trying to say. Maybe to introduce myself, I've got a small business that focuses on organizational change, so somehow caring and what did you guys
Caring?
say? Caring or care at the same time. And I'm also a mother of 2, which got me to experience some of the, darker parts of mental health, because that balancing of business and trying to be at all mom and business was really challenging for me. But I've come out of the tunnel on the other end, which is really nice. But when you hear stories like Lockie's, you really do know that once you experience it, you hear this information differently, because once you experience, you actually feel it and you know. Whereas before, I didn't know what people were talking about. When they talk about mental health or depression, I was like, yeah, must be shit. So, but my question, I think, is in regards to Lockie's wish for improvement, that management can hear concerns and issues better off the shop floor, and instead of just having the staff and ourselves palming people off to the EAP. This is something I experience a lot when I'm working in change. Organizations going through change, there's resistance, which is natural because people are assessing their concerns. And the first answer is, we have a grievance counsellor. Here's the number of EAP, and the ears are shut. So I guess what you see is the business case or the value of educating leaders early to be able to deal or listen and not advise answers and solutions. Well, I don't know if that came out as a real question. Sorry. But how do you see approaching management to invest into improving this particular skill?
Well, I think the return on investment, Dr. Bowers did a study in particular on the FIFO industry, and the return on investment was $5.75 for every dollar spent. So that's a good incentive to actually tick that off. But for management in particular, I believe that the reason that we're palming people off to EAP to counsellors is because they're just really uncomfortable about having those conversations, and usually that sense of feeling uncomfortable is because they're suppressing or ignoring, still have buried something that they're not yet willing to work through. So it'd be cultivating a level of awareness within that management team around themselves first, acknowledging it, accepting it, and then doing what they can to work through it. And in going through that process, they now understand what that process is going to look like for someone else. When you have no control, when you have a high level of uncertainty, we tend to avoid going in that direction. So it really is just getting them comfortable with themselves in the process so that they're comfortable walking someone else through that as well.
Oh, anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, the only thing I'd add to that is, we get to work with some pretty large organisations and some smaller organisations. I won't name drop, but for example, Rio Tinto, that's obviously an organisation that's gone through a lot recently, and it's not just change in terms of their structures or their teams or the way they do business. They've had external pressures as well, and rightfully so, by the way. But when it comes to the one thing that I do believe works in a trickle-down concept is happiness and mental health. Economics, we can have our debate about it, right? But trickle-down happiness is truly a concept that I believe in. So, making sure that the leaders and the managers and the people that have influence are the ones that go through the training first. Usually people use that as like a box tick to make sure that they've done something, but that's fine. I think that's truly the place to start, because if they then start to work on themselves, that will permeate, and the mood, the morale, all those key indicators will start to change.
Any other questions?
So just on your question, a couple of weeks ago we created for the FIFO Mental Happiness Summit, like a safety document. It's all the mining industry, they have this booklet that they put in their pockets with a take 5, and it's really just giving you 5 prompts to improve your awareness around your physical environment and assessing risk. So we've done the same for emotional, the way we feel emotionally and our behaviour. So that's called a trigger 5x5, and that's something that you're more than welcome to download. I can give you the link after this. It's a PDF. Anyone here, you're more than welcome to download it and use it in your organisation or business. But that's just going to give you 5 prompts. If you're in a moment where you're a little bit heated, overwhelmed, stressed, or anxious, to identify the way that you're showing up, identify the patterns of behaviour that lead to that, take some level of accountability. How did I contribute to that situation or event playing out? And then from there, anchoring in the ticking of the yes box, like did this system or process work for us? Yes, anchor that belief and that feeling into the body.
Cool. Where can people download that from, by the way?
So I'll put that, if you go to Instagram, FIFO Happiness, at FIFO Happiness, it'll be the link in our bio. You can download that, and it's got an explainer video of how each step works and how we believe you can roll that out and get buy-in from your organisation.
Terrific. Anything else out there? Go ahead.
2 questions. I think I just sort of heard it then, Robbie, when you were saying working with sort of happiness going from the top down. In FIFO, it seems like, or it sounds a little bit like it's a little bit more not so much in the green. I'm wondering, are you doing those same sorts of things, or what are the types of things you do in the green to stop people from getting to the point of like, yeah, I need to go to the EAP or be referred to the EAP or whatever it is. So I have that question. But then also around the conversation of a lot of people who are unhappy but thinking they're depressed, with so much talk around mental health and stuff like that, which I do think is important, but how do we navigate that balance? Rather than people thinking they have a problem because it's talked about so much and things like that.
That's the second one.
The second part. Okay, we'll go backwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, it's unfortunately a lot of it is up to us as an individual, realizing and connecting with yourself. And although we have friends around us, we put on this facade, and as Robbie said, if we asked any of you this morning, how are you? Everyone would go, oh good, thanks, great. And if you really look at yourself internally, you know that that's exactly what you would do. Because you're not going to say, oh, I'm so shit, my kids run around like idiots and I hate my boss. Because we're seriously not going to own up and say that to someone. But chemically, and not to get too into the nitty gritty, when we do that, our subconscious believes us. So when we go to bed at night, when we first fall asleep and we go into the phase where our eyes are clicking up and down, that first REM that we go into is when our subconscious is able to, or unable, to file everything if you look at it like a filing cabinet. If your conscious mind doesn't know the solution to something, it goes into your subconscious. And that's why a lot of us can't remember what our triggers are or what's happening to us or what has happened to us in the past. So this is where journaling, as Lockie said before, I was trying to call him Robbie, but you don't look anything like him. This is where, and we do notice, like in every store that you go to now, you can buy a journal, but you don't need to spend money. If you just wrote down before you went to bed the crap that's going on in your mind, it saves your subconscious from putting it away to be triggered on another day. So if I could, go around to everyone that I know and say, all you need to do is write it down. It's an action from the brain to the hand that removes it from needing to be filed in your subconscious. So ultimately, if everyone journaled, we'd have world peace. But the FIFO stuff.
I was going to say for the second question as well. In regards to the differentiation between everything and awareness, knowledge is power, true, but action is better. So I think when you have that heightened awareness around something, it's the shark in the water debate for me. Sharks have been in the water in greater numbers for thousands, millions, trillions, whatever years. And just recently, in the last 10 years, all of a sudden they're a massive problem for us because the exacerbation that comes with the media, and it's not to downplay anyone that's been through something with a shark, but it seems to me that there's now millions of sharks just off Leighton Beach. Do you know what I mean? Like it's that shark in the water thing. So if we truly break it down, the numbers are alarming, yes, but not to get Trump on you, but the more you test and the more you're aware, the more positives there will be, right? The more cases there will be. So yes, with increased awareness comes increased complexities around what is mental health and what is depression and what is a depressed mood and what is unhappiness and what is happiness. But if we just keep pushing on our path to make sure that a message like ours or a message like "Are you okay?" Keeps happening, then we will break through that barrier, which is the overwhelm of the mental health sector and concept. So I hope that kind of answers your question on the second one. And that means when people go out there today after this and start talking to people about what they saw today and what they did, they'll immediately, that person, I guarantee you, will think that we sat here and spoke about suicide, depression, stress, anxiety, dark, gloom. Whereas, as you can tell, our message is really about the upside, the positive side of mental health. If I said to you physical health, in fact, can we do a quick activity? Yeah, excellent, thanks. If I say to you the category is physical health, I'm going to say 3, 2, 1, go. Whatever comes to your mind, say it. 3, 2, 1, go. What did you say? Workout. Running, exercise.
Swimming problem.
Sorry?
Hip problem.
Hip problem, yeah. Okay. That's probably the only real negative that we got out of the whole crowd. But if I say to you mental health, and we do this in our workshops, at all the different organisations we work with, and the funny thing is they all sort of like stop, and their subconscious goes, don't talk about suicide, dark, depression, sadness. And then that immediate trigger for me is to make a bit of fun of the crowd and say, well, why is everyone so quiet? We just yelled out, running, hip problem, physical, it wasn't an issue. So I think to break down the stigma, which is the other word that we're overwhelmed with at the moment, we just need to make sure that individuals know the difference between the categories and keep pushing on that front. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
I think at the summit we had Chris Harris, who was the GM of Community Engagement at Youth Focus, who's now a mental health consultant for Mineral Resources, and he put it, he framed it really nicely in a way that I hadn't really thought about it before, and that's not framing it as we're coming in to solve mental health, which immediately puts people in a box where it's like, okay, I'm not good enough, I'm in a space where I need to be helped and healed. It's framing it the same way we frame working out and exercising, which is like mental strength and conditioning. So therefore it's productive, it's constructive, it's progressive, rather than having to sit first in the place where we're not happy with ourselves or we need to be healed.
Excellent. Makes total sense. All right, what do we got? Do we need to let you guys stand up and walk around? Yeah, I think, thank you so much. Thanks so much for spending your time and teaching us all about this stuff. It's really important to keep having these conversations. So, thank you. So, we've got this place until 9. Be aware of the flying furniture. We're going to turn it back into a co-working space. But please come up and have some conversations. Speak to each other. Make sure you don't say good or fine or any of those things. And we're back here in 2 weeks. As we said, we're looking for a speaker. So if you are interested, please contact us at contact@morningstartup.com. But we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Cheers.